Hi everyone, welcome to Falwell Hall, and if you're watching this, you're watching the curriculum evaluation for CI 5150. I'm Logan, and soon you'll hear from my classmates, Matt, Ethan, Brian, Lauren, and Erica. Right now what we did is we made a graphic organizer to talk about a specific curriculum, and for any given curriculum we were evaluating what kind of biases were in that curriculum, whether implicit or explicit. So that was a really good way for us to talk about any lesson plan, and the specific one we looked at was called Rational Numbers Project. That's something created by faculty of professors in CEHD here at the U of M. So it was really interesting to get a at-home view at one project and see how it had bias implicitly and explicitly. So let's go straight to Matt and hear about what he has to say.
While many lesson plans have explicitly stated goals, they may have implicit goals that seek to further ideologies held by the author of the lesson plan. In this lesson, it's kind of obvious that what the explicit goal is, that we want to push students towards mental math, and that's visible in the lesson notes. In order to apply this framework to other lessons, you should be on the lookout for implicit goals pushing ideologies or values towards students. The next question we have is, how do we evaluate our students? Because evaluation is extremely important in education. If we don't know what our students have, if we don't assess our students properly, we don't know what they actually learned. And so we can't make a judgment call as to whether or not we need to keep going or we can move on. So if you're evaluating your lesson plans, you should investigate how your students will be assessed to see if there's any bias that's in there. Because biased assessments can inaccurately reflect student achievement or unfairly affect student experience. The assessment strategies in this lesson include group sharing, which may bias students who are willing or able to answer questions quickly. Students are able to throw their hand up quickly and able to do the math quickly, then they will be the ones assessed more frequently. However, monitoring small groups and reviewing worksheets allow all students to sort of be evaluated, sort of minimizing that. And many of the problems presented in here are word problems, and this unfortunately skews a little bit away from ELL students, unfortunately penalizing them for their lack of familiarity with the language.
All right, so talking about assessments, we need to make sure that the evaluations that students are being graded on and assessed through aren't biased. We don't want students to be unfairly penalized because maybe the tests are bad. Looking through a lesson plan, evaluator should really critically look at, is there any part of any assessment, formal or informal, that unfairly penalizes students for any facts about their life that aren't related to the learning. To activate and kind of deal with these biases, it's going to be a case-by-case basis. Unfortunately, we've heard that a lot in this class, but it does depend on what the bias in the assessment is and the students you're facing. So it's hard to give a general to-do when acting on a bias, but if you can, look for ways to minimize bias, to have more accurate assessments. Evaluations should accurately describe student achievement, and if they don't, that's not going to be an effective measure for your lesson. In this lesson, we did look at evaluations both in-class group share, small work, and then small group work, and then worksheets. And I think all three bias towards some groups, but since students are evaluated in all three, they are just looking for mastery of the material. So if a student can show that in one of the three, it does help a student overcome any bias that may have hurt them. So this lesson does try to mitigate bias in assessment by having different methods of assessment. Representation is also very important in curriculum. If students don't see or hear about people who look like them, who think like them or act like them, it's understandable that they would withdraw or become disinterested from the lesson itself. Going through a lesson, evaluators should really try to list every person that's represented, their pronouns, anything to do with a profession, especially related to if we're gendering professions passively, if all the women are moms or all the dads are doctors, that's definitely something to look at and change. We don't want to be repeating implicit biases that are not correct in these lessons, just because it's easy to make a lesson with Jack and John go up and down a hill. Looking at your lesson, you should always, look through and see if your representation is off, and then modify that. That is something that's easy to action. This lesson did a good job of using a large set of unique names. They didn't repeat names. There were names that sounded like they were from varied backgrounds. There were both male names and female names based on the pronouns provided. And actually more females, which is maybe atypical than one would expect, but this lesson did include a complete lack of representation of any non-binary individuals. So make sure you're thinking about the implications of what you're saying to all your students when you don't include a group like that. So try to be as inclusive as possible in your curriculum.
All right, so the next question is, where are examples of prejudice explicit or implicit in our lesson unit curriculum, if any? So we have this question because we want to look carefully at what topics, names, activities, etc. that we describe in the curriculum and lessons. Sometimes when we write a lesson, we can include information or details that can offend or exclude certain students implicitly. So in this lesson, there are some biases towards physical activities, specifically biking. So then the next question we have is, what background knowledge is required for this lesson? Is the background knowledge accessible to all students? So in addition to biases, we ask this question because sometimes students won't know the background text or background information of a problem, and then they won't be able to solve it. Some of this could be sports informations or text informations. So in this lesson, these problems require knowledge of units. While not necessarily vital to calculations, unfamiliar terms can trip up students.
So the next thing we're going to talk about is technology. In the lesson at hand that we analyzed, you didn't need any technology, only just paper and pencil. But something we will have to consider for other lessons possibly is making sure that all students have access to all necessary technology, whether it is internet or anything else. And then we also need to look at where is there room for student discussion or inputs. So the students get to work together in pairs or other small groups to talk to each other about their ideas on how to solve these problems. After working in small groups, a large group discussion will take place at the end of the whole class. This way the students can share their ideas and everyone can get exposed to them. The teacher is also free to select students to share their ideas, making sure that all students can share over time and feel valued.
Another important criteria that we examined in our framework was, does this curriculum excite, engage, and empower students? We wanted to make sure that our curriculum is student-centered, and so any curriculum is student-centered, so this was an important piece that we examined. In this lesson in particular, we saw that students did some partner work and engaged with peers to solve word problems, and then in the large group, students had an opportunity to share with class. Each of those activities were more student-centered and allowed students to use their voice to share their knowledge about the math. Now we're going to talk about some of our thoughts on this framework. We did think there were some good things about the framework we created. It challenges teachers to dig deeper and cover possible biases they may have or that the lesson has that may offend, penalize, or exclude some students. And it allows teachers to begin with the end in mind, thinking about the endpoint and how they'll evaluate students fairly. And it also asks about the honest question about whether students are excited about this even, and how we can continue to engage students through our work. There are some weaknesses to this framework we've created. It doesn't give any recommendations on how to answer important questions, like student engagement or biases. It's not really an action plan. The lesson also has only been applied to this particular lesson, or this framework has only been applied to this particular lesson. So other lessons may have some holes in this framework. This framework also only identifies the primary goals of the lesson and ignores maybe potential underlying or implicit goals.
So thanks for watching, everybody. If you have any comments or questions, please put in that discussion board any comments you have. We'd really appreciate your feedback. But yeah, that was our curriculum evaluation. So thanks for watching. Bye.